Hi everyone, I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center, and you found your way to our professional development series, and we're very happy about that. For those of you who are watching asynchronously, I'm glad you found us there too. For anyone watching us in real time, saying, hey, my colleagues absolutely have to hear what we talked about today, we'll have this posted up on our webpage here in just a little bit after our session concludes. Couple of announcements before we get going. Number one, we have a professional development certificate that we give out. My colleagues will drop that information in the chat. It's also available for you on our webpage. That if you are a GTA, a faculty member, or a staff member, you can get a professional development certificate if you attend enough events, do post-event surveys, and do a little reflection. If you're a faculty member who wants to extend other people's teaching beyond your own, you can become a TLC fellow, and then you get to present in our series the next year. So that's really cool, and that information is available at that same link. I want to put on your radar an amazing event that's happening tomorrow. Um, and this information will also be put out over social media and our TLC Hub, our Teams channel, that if you want to be part of, just let us know. But tomorrow we have a teaching tech talk called Your Teaching Reimagined, and this will be a 1 hour interactive tour of the Sunderland Foundation Innovation Lab. And you don't have to go there. It's going to happen over Zoom. They're going to walk through with cameras in real time, and you get to see all the wonderful things that that lab has to offer. And that is tomorrow, April 16th. That's a Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. That information you got to register for so that you get that Zoom link. But the registration is super simple. You get a QR code to click on there. You put in your name and your email, and bam, you have the ticket to come into that event. The Soto Showcase is coming up in a little bit. That will be on Monday, May 11th, starting at 1:30, but doors open a little earlier than that, in Hale Library, room 581. That's the Monday afternoon of finals week. And we are very excited. Our applications were due this past Friday, and we have a lot of them. So we're very excited for that. So if any of you on this call right now or watching later submitted, thank you very much for submitting. And we'll have decisions out probably in the next week as we start to get that kind of sorted out and find out where things are going. But very excited for that event to hear our colleagues talk about the innovative things they do in their classrooms, as well as any research they do related to teaching and learning. Um, Next week, we have an amazing event as well. Dr. Suze Parath from the College of Education will be talking about mindful metacognition. Great way to kind of think about keeping yourself ready to teach, which is going to be awesome. And probably going to do some of that stuff with our students too, I would expect, in Suze's presentation. But today, I'm very excited to say that we have from the College of Business, Dr. Brandon Savage. I've known Brandon for a long time. I'm impressed by Brandon every time we talk to him. He's amazing thoughts on teaching. He's also been selected as one of our nominations to KBOR, the Kansas Board of Regents, for the Faculty of the Year Award, which is super fantastic. And for that, congratulations, Brandon. It was a very stiff competition to get to that point, and very well-deserved recognition for you and all the things that you do. So Brandon's going to be talking today about improving course design with targeted end of the term feedback. And I'll remind you, we did one on TVALs last semester too. So this is a good complementary extension of some of the things that we had done there too. So if you're looking for kind of a set, this would be kind of part two in that set. And it's going to go into much more detail about some of the items that we might do to make our teaching better. And I'll put in the thing that I say all the time is TVALs are information. And what we can do is we can make them even collect better information. So without further ado, Brandon, floor is yours.
Well, I'm honored to be able to speak to this group, and um, before I kind of jump into the actual presentation, I want to get a little bit of background on my journey, and definitely want to highlight the role that the TLC has played in my journey. Although, if you are a regular attender of this every Wednesday at noon, I may feel like a stranger because I haven't been able to attend for the last almost 2 years because I've been on Faculty Senate Leadership Committee, and we have a committee meeting right during this time every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday. Today's an exception because there's an open forum today. Um, and so I haven't been able to been here. That this group and this mechanism and the Teaching and Learning Center in general has been transformative to my career. And to kind of put that into some more perspective, um, if any of you have seen The Good Place, it's a kind of funny show that was on, and there's a character in it who is not necessarily a robot, but it's kind of like an AI avatar who interacts with these individuals. And every time someone calls her a robot, she says, "Not a robot. My not a robot is not a doctor. I don't have a PhD. I appreciate Don introducing me as such, but I'm not." And that kind of goes into my background. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to talk about everything on here, but this is just kind of my journey, my professional journey. I spent the first 2 decades of my career in industry, in operations, technology, customer experience, and the electronic security industry, kind of the ADTs of the world, and worked for a lot of the larger electronic security companies across the nation. My career took me from Utah, where I went to school, to the Bay Area, California for a little while, back to Utah, out to Philadelphia, and eventually it brought me here just a little over 10 years ago. In fact, it was just a few weeks ago, we kind of hit the 10-year anniversary of us moving to Manhattan. And what originally brought me to Manhattan is I was asked to be a GM of a call center that we were opening up here in Manhattan. And once we kind of got settled in, I had helped manage some other call centers earlier in my career, and I knew that college students were great employees for call centers because they're looking for jobs in the evening and the weekends, which are times that are sometimes hard to find employees for call centers. And I'm like, how can I get more networked with this big university here in Manhattan to get some students to work in my call center? And I looked online and said, well, maybe I can be an adjunct, and got connected with our department head here in the Department of Management. And because of credentials, my MBA, and I had the opportunity to get my MBA from Wharton, which is some people think that's a big deal, and thought, I guess, come in, be an adjunct, and that started my journey for teaching. And I think my first class I taught was either business ethics or business strategy. And what most of us here know is that when you go to teach your very first class, the amount of preparation that you get is probably pretty small. Department head said, "Hey, I taught this class before. Here's my syllabus. Here's the book that I used. Good luck." And then it was off to the races. And I would say that I certainly floundered in those first 2 years that I taught as an adjunct. And uh, the one thing that I can say I had going for me was that I cared about the students. I genuinely did care. And I was able to communicate that and to convey that across to my students, even though they certainly questioned whether I knew what I was doing from a teaching perspective. And um, I had the opportunity to start teaching full time 2 years later. The company that brought me out here was on its path to bankruptcy. They laid off a bunch of people in the Kansas part of the organization, and myself included. And I turned to my wife and said, "Hey, where do you want to go next? There's no other electronic security companies here in Manhattan." But we'd been here for 2 years. Little Apple had cast a spell on our family, and our two oldest were in high school. And my wife said, "Figure out a way we can stay. I'd like to stay here." And the way that we were able to stay here was me being able to teach full time and the opportunity open. So that kind of got me into where I am today. Now, I remember, as we kind of cast our eyes back, this was my T-val from the very first semester that I taught. And there's a couple of these that are, kind of stick out. I was going back and revisiting this yesterday. Actually, I'm like, oh, I remember some of those were kind of harsh. Um, yeah, and others you can see that they could tell I cared, but I would not recommend taking this class with this professor. Exams are unnecessarily difficult. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Like I was just like, "Oh, this is how you do it." And when I got this feedback, I did care about the feedback because in my role in customer experience in industry, we had done a lot of surveying with our customers. We were surveying our customers constantly. Every time they called in, someone on the call center talked to them. When they hung up, an email went out to them and say, "Hey, we saw that you talked to Sam. Tell us how that call went." And we would take that feedback and look for ways to improve where we were falling short. And I immediately did that. In fact, this part of you'll say this does not look like a normal T-val. It's because I had already put this in because this is the type of question that I would ask customers is on a scale of 1 to 10, would you recommend our company to friends, family, relatives? And so first time I'm like, oh, T-val, I know surveys. And I kind of put this in here. And then the second part of the question is what is the reason for this score? I've always liked this is kind of a net promoter score structure we're not going to talk about this, but it immediately got me asking for feedback from my students. This was the second semester I taught. The instructor's not teacher material. You can tell he's not interested in actually helping students learn, but more so in the paycheck. I would suggest not bringing him back. I definitely would tell my friends to make sure they do not have him as an instructor for this class or any. Um, we're always going to get this type of feedback, but it did make me question, like, what am I doing that makes them feel like that I have this business? And then other students in the same class felt like I cared. Dawn, question.
So I just want to note, because this is a point that I think is important for colleagues, is that while Brandon is kind of talking about these things that made him think, like the resounding positivity of many of the comments is something that can't be ignored. And what I'm seeing Brandon do is what we all do is we focus in on those negative things, right? So I do want to kind of point out that, on the previous one in particular, like there was one negative comment, it's the one you highlighted. So it's just like I just want all of us to kind of see like part of good teaching is sometimes looking at those patterns and really kind of focusing on the negative cognitive bias. I just
Yeah,
wanted to point that out, Brandon.
putting that one aside, there were plenty of other positive ones here, and it could have been easy for me to latch on to this negative and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I did want to improve, and I did want to make sure, is there a way that I can teach and not have negative comments? And I haven't figured that out yet. I still get negative comments almost every semester in every class. But what I want to talk about today is a process that in my discipline in operations and supply chain is a Japanese concept called Kaizen. Um, this is a principle of continuous improvement. In manufacturing, Kaizen drives these small, ongoing changes that yield, lasting excellence. And I wanted to incorporate the same type of thing into my class. So kind of the structure going from here is I'm going to talk through this specific additional survey I started to implement to my class and how I've used that and how I think it can help you. I want to talk about the assumptions going into me using the survey. We'll look at the structure of the survey. We'll look at how we review the data and the feedback that comes with that survey, and then how you can use that to make changes. And as Dawn said, I hope that many of you um, consider implementing something like this semester. It's not too late at all to do this. This is a survey you did not have to have set up at the beginning of the semester. You can implement this in the last week of the semester. In fact, I tell students to take this survey after they've completed the final exam, and you'll kind of see why. Um, and it can be valuable for you to figure out things to tweak. So let's go through some of the assumptions that lay a foundation for this course design survey. So my assumptions. Um, I assume that my course design is never perfect and it needs to be improved every semester. And so at the end of every semester, I'm saying, what can I tweak and improve this next semester to make it better? It's never finished. Second, I go into this with the assumption that students want to learn concepts and principles that will help them with their career. If we disagree with that, then maybe this isn't going to be valuable, but I have to make that assumption going in. The third thing is I assume that students recognize components that lead to effective learning and those that don't. Now, I'm sure there's probably research on that. That's not my specialty, but I believe that at least their input as to what feels right, what helps them, is at least relevant for me to listen to and consider as I'm making changes in the future. Recognizing that, and we'll get to this a bit later, that different students have different learning styles, right? And so certain things in your course may help some, but others don't see the value in, and that's okay. But you'll be able to see that in the data. And the last assumption that I'm making is that students will share their feedback if you ask them to do that. So with these assumptions explained, let's look at the structure of what I call my end of semester course design survey. And so we start off looking at what is our syllabus, and what are the main components of our syllabus. So most of us probably have something in our syllabus that looks something like this, where we're saying this is how we allocate the points across our class. And this is my Management 421 class. This is Introduction to Operations and Supply Chain. And so I've got some kind of warm-up assignments, and then I've got the main kind of components of the course. I've got 14 dynamic study modules, one for each chapter. I've got 14 concept quizzes. I've got 14 calculation quizzes. I've got a handful of simulations they do. I've got three quizzes on this book that we read in class called The Goal. We've got two assignments on project management. We've got a spelling quiz, believe it or not. And then we have 14 reflection and application assignments, which creating those assignments was something that came out of the TLC course years and years ago that I added into my course at some point. I've got an attendance policy, I've got a final exam, total of 2,000 points. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the components of our course, which usually are expressed in this part of our syllabus, and then also add in our lectures. And what we're going to do is for each of these components, we're going to have a survey, and we're going to have three questions for each of these components. So here's what those three questions are. We're going to ask, and we're looking at the first one. So let's say dynamic study module. So students, when you're looking at the dynamic study modules on a scale of 0 to 10, how effective was this course component at contributing to your learning? Give it a number. Second, what is the reason for your score? And then third, what would you change about this component, if anything? Now, I will give you my preferences when I create this survey, and I usually do it in Qualtrics. And so you're going to have repeated these three questions over and over and over for each of the components of your course. And I would highly recommend that for these top two questions, when you're setting up your Qualtrics survey, you make the response required. You got to give a number and you've got to give a reason for your score. The bottom one, like if they give you a 10, they may not have any reason to change it. You can have that be optional. But forcing them to think through, why did I give it a 10 or why did I give it a 1? That gives you some qualitative data in that second question that becomes very valuable. So you're going to have quantitative at the top, you're going to have qualitative in the second question, and you may get some other guidance in question 3 that will be useful later on. So once and then the other thing that I do is I make this survey worth points. And so as part of, I tell them like, take it after your final. Once you kind of know what all your grades are, I want you to go in for, 10, 20 points, go in and complete this. And I tell them the reason that I want them to complete this. This helps me to be able to look at ways that I can tweak and improve this course for next semester's class. And for this particular one, I'm trying to remember real quick if I make this one. Oh no, this one can't be anonymous because I want to give them points. And so at the end of this survey, they have to say their name. And then that way I can make sure I'm getting their points to them. So I can do it through Qualtrics. I get it so that I see the responses that come in. I set them up so triggers, so I get the emails and I go through the emails and I'm marking them and giving them points. So Cindy says, what about the ethics of credit tied to feedback? Again, they're not giving feedback on me necessarily as a professor, is the way that I position. I actually have a second survey that they can do anonymous, where they can give feedback on me as an instructor and things that I can improve. I position this particular survey as this is about the design of the course, and I want your feedback on this, and I'm willing to give you points on this to give me feedback on things that I can improve or change or things you like within the course. So that's, at least in my mind, Cindy, how I resolve the issue about ethics with feedback. And this is primarily used for me. Like I'm not using this for other awards or anything like this. This isn't something that I share with my department head unless I guess if he asked. But this is just an internal calibration type of score. Hand raised. Question.
This B. I have a question here. So if how are you going to assign score well assign points to the students if the survey is anonymous?
This one is not anonymous. I have a separate one that's anonymous where I ask for feedback on me. This one at the end, I do ask them to put in their name, and that allows me to go in and say, hey, you completed this, you get those extra 20 points. Now, again, that's my recommendation because I want to try to get as every student to weigh in on this. And I tell them, like, if you think these components are terrible, tell me. That's fine. I need to know what your opinion is on this. So they don't have to feel like they're judging me. They're judging the design of the course. So once we've collected all the data, what do we do with that feedback? So we get a nice Excel spreadsheet from Qualtrics, and we've got kind of those three questions for each of the components of the course. So I like to take the 1 through 10 thing, and I can do some averaging, I can do some standard deviation, I can look at max and min. I can potentially look at how I'm improving those scores over time as I'm making changes to it. Um, You'll see here in a second, I'll show kind of a heat map for one section where I kind of pull this data. The reasons for that score, that qualitative data, gives you some input to understand at least what students' perception is of that particular component and why they like it and why they don't like it. And you can use that to analyze or parse however you want. And then improvement suggestions, particularly for identifying, hey, what's the 1 or 2 or 3 areas that I'm going to try to improve between this semester and next semester? Um, Getting their feedback can give me some ideas. I don't necessarily commit to say, the students know best, but at least I'm hearing their feedback and considering it and thinking, is this something that I need to change? And usually the quantitative data can tell me whether or not this, I guess from a Kaizen point of view, whatever my weakest link is across all my components is something I need to change. Like that's okay. It's the weakest. Students' feedback is saying this is something that I should look to improve. Um, let's see. And then, yes, just feedback online. Andy's saying you could always link a separate survey for them to put their name at the end so that their responses aren't linked to their names, but you can give them credit for completing. Absolutely true. Um, Don says he sometimes have them screenshot the final thank you screen, upload that to Canvas for credit. Yeah, so there's some ways if you really feel like you want to make it anonymous. Um, I think that you should provide some anonymous feedback. Like I said, I actually have two surveys. I have my course design survey, and then I have what I call my course delivery survey, where they can provide some anonymous feedback to me, and I say, I can take it, bring it on. Um, so let's look at, this is spring 2024 results for one of these management 421 classes. Got the different components here on the left. I've got the average of that first question 1 to 10. I've got the standard deviation of that question. I've got the max score. I've got the min score. And so you can see here, there's always going to be students that are really happy or at least just clicking through the survey to get the points. You've got some who are feeling confident enough to say, hey, I'm giving you a 1 or 2 on this. And I haven't broken this one up. I would doubt that the 1s and 2s are all coming from the same student. What you usually see is students are able to kind of say, this is the part I did like, this is the part I didn't like, and you're just giving them freedom to be able to express it. As I look at this from my perspective, how I use the data and how you decide to use the data can totally be different, is that I'm looking at the average score and saying, what's the lowest one there? Where are students not seeing the value? In this particular semester, uh, spelling quiz, particularly because of its low score and the kind of variability in the standard deviation, was one to me that kind of stood out and said, okay, in my mind, that's the one that I'm going to dive into. To give some background on this particular assignment, this was a part of the course that I inherited, 8 years ago when it got handed off to me, and I thought it was an awesome component. It was 25 of the most commonly misspelled business words. Now, how you give a spelling quiz, I think back when I first started doing it, we had everyone in class, it was really easy to actually do a spelling quiz where they're like writing out, you can grade it. As we went through the pandemic and as I started shifting a lot of my courses to a high flex environment where people could join via Zoom, either in person or also then taking the content and watching it asynchronously. Hello to those that are watching this asynchronously. I'm glad you're joining, glad we have this available for you. You should consider doing this for your classes because students appreciate it. I had to do it so it was online. So it turned out to be a multiple choice quiz. And if they're doing it on their own, because I actually did it so I'm not even doing it in class anymore, the reason for it was, look, I understand we all have spell check and we're writing emails and we're using our phones, and that most of these misspellings spell check is going to catch for us. But in a business context, there are going to be times where you're in the boardroom and you're writing up on the whiteboard and you're writing a word and spell check's not there. I don't want you to embarrass yourself instead of in front of your team, in front of your boss, in front of your boss's boss. I want you to be able to spell these words correctly. Or if you're writing on a little yellow sticky note, these are words that you're going to use in business and they're most commonly misspelled. I want you to learn them. And so I ended up structuring this assignment. It's kind of evolved over the years to where it's like now it's multiple choice. You can take as many times as you want. And I want you as students to take it the first time blind and see which ones you get wrong and then realize I don't know how to spell that word. And then you can take this quiz as many times as you want till you get comfort level that I understand how to spell this word right, and you're going to get the highest score. It's not a huge points thing of the class, but it's to teach them this particular thing and have them take ownership of, hey, I want to learn how to spell this. But in order for them to see the value of that, I need to frame it correctly. And I've found if I look back on some of the semesters where I've done this analysis, they either weren't paying attention or weren't listening when I gave the framing early in the semester as to why this was part of the class. And they're like, why are we even doing this? Are we in seventh grade? I've got autocorrect and I don't need this. So part of it, as I saw the feedback for this particular semester, is I needed to better frame that. And so as I take the data, so I don't know if this is the exact spreadsheet from this particular semester, but here's all the data. I can go into whatever column it was that was the reason for spelling, and I can copy and paste that data, and I can go into, you can either just review it one by one, or this is a great place where you can have ChatGPT. You can copy and paste their feedback and ask it to summarize. Please summarize the qualitative feedback for the spelling quiz based on these student answers. Format the summary in a way that can be shared on a single slide. If I did that, I get something that looks like this, where it kind of gave me a sentiment analysis. 60% of the responses were positive, 25% were mixed and neutral, 15% were flat out negative. What did students say was working well? What were some of their suggestions for improvement? Um, oh, you can't see this, sorry. I covered it up with this. So this was the slide that I was just reading through. Um, Other ways that I've done it, I was kind of going through some of my other prompts. I'm going to paste feedback from students on a specific component of a course I teach. I'll include a field indicating whether they were in an online or in-person section. First, summarize positive feedback on this component, then summarize negative feedback on this component. Third, identify any patterns identified that are clearly different between in-person or online students. Lastly, summarize suggested improvements from students. So I'm basically, in this, I'm copying all three columns of the data for spelling quiz, pasting it in, asking for ChatGPT to give me some trends, and then I get this type of answer. I just dropped my mouse. Hold on a second. Okay, so now I've got some feedback, and for me, one of the things that students said is like, "Hey, I did this once." And I didn't really remember it. If you want me to be able to learn this, you should be asking me to do this quiz multiple times during the semester so I can see if it's sticking. And I'm like, well, that's easy to do. And so I just incorporate it instead of it being in one of the last modules of the semester, I have it to where we do it like 3 times during the semester. I'm also rethought how I was. Oh, yeah, when students kept saying like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I have autocorrect. I don't need this. And although I say it like very, very early in the semester as we go through the breakdown of the syllabus, why we have a spelling quiz, when I read that and saw those responses over and over again, I'm like, how are they not getting this? And as I went and looked at the actual assignment in Canvas, I saw that the description was blank. I had not given any context for that particular assignment once they actually went in to go take it in Canvas. So I'm like, I need to change that. So one, I made it so students take it multiple times during the semester. I went back and kind of reworded what the purpose of this was. So when they go to take it for the first time or multiple times in Canvas, that I'm explaining out what is the reason that we're doing this, and hoping to see that score get better. And I probably should have grabbed the semester after this to kind of show, but I'm pretty sure from what I remember, the score went up. So it gives you an opportunity to be able to identify what are the weakest areas from a student perspective, and then start thinking about how to change it. I recognize that I have different elements in my course design that are for different learning styles. And so for some of them, I'm going to get feedback where students are like, this doesn't help me at all. And I recognize that's just not your learning style. But if I see other students that are giving it a 10 and saying, this really helped me, I really like this component, I can leave that in, even though it maybe has a little bit lower score because it's just a difference between students where it resonates with them and other students don't get this. I can look at the suggestions for changes that they give, and some of them will be like, "Yeah, nope, not doing it that way," and others will be like, "Yeah, I guess I could try that and see how that works." And if you're more um, informed on the best practices, you can then incorporate those in as well. Don.
So I'm just going to applaud you for you're using the data to inform your decisions, but the data aren't making your decisions. So
Yep.
sometimes the numbers are saying, hey, that isn't a good call, but knowing what some of your students need, that's going to be a different decision. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. It's not a purely empirical solution. You're using the information to inform your decisions.
Yes, this becomes both quantitative and qualitative to say, okay, what do I want to improve? You've at least got some numbers to back up which ones probably need some improvement, because at least from a student's perspective, they don't feel like it's helping their learning process at all. Um, but then how you change that can be informed by teaching, from just kind of subtle principles, from other things you're hearing from peers, things you're learning here in TLC chats, and just always looking for ways to get those scores up, to figure out ways that I can make that better. So students feel like that particular component of the course is helping me to learn. And again, assumption is that they know what's best for them, and maybe that's not always the best. But I think by the end of the semester, I think they've got a pretty good idea, and they're able to kind of give their feedback based on what they're seeing in other classes. So kind of just in summary, and then we can kind of open it up for Q&A and thoughts and feedback. The purpose is to get that qualitative feedback that's not tied to you as an instructor, but is tied to the architecture of the course and the different type of assignments you have in there. And then you're asking students feedback, both quantitative and qualitative, to figure out how you can potentially improve it. Those open text response prompts really have a lot of gold in them. If you force students to put something in there, and if you frame it in a way that you're saying, hey, I'm just looking for a way to be able to improve this course for next semester, I find that students are generally, if you built that trust with them as an instructor, they're going to give you feedback. And even if they think you're a terrible instructor, they're going to tell you why. This is a chance where they get to tell why they think you're terrible, at least why the course is designed poorly, and you can take that for what it's worth. What I've found is that by doing this every semester, it gives me feedback, numbers, data, and ideas of how I can continually improve my courses in order to make them a better learning experience for the students. And I think this is one of many ways that I've been able to incorporate into my teaching philosophy that has helped me to improve. And I gladly share it with you, encourage you to be able to do something similar and just see what that data tells you and look for ways that you might be able to improve it. I think that you'll enjoy that. You'll look forward to getting this particular survey each semester, and students will will appreciate as your courses continue to evolve and improve. And I appreciate your time today and open the floor up for questions. Looks like there might have been. Andy says, do you tell students that you're putting their responses in ChatGPT to analyze them? Students in my courses know that I use ChatGPT for a lot of things. I certainly have that in the syllabus, that I reserve the right to use specific assignments and to put their answers in. I will say that those 3 columns that I'm putting in don't have any identifiable information, even though I never am pasting the entire Excel spreadsheet in that would have their name as one of the columns. I do just those 3 columns to preserve student identities. I do think that's important, but otherwise, I probably could do a better job and make sure in my course, when they go do the survey, to explicitly say that I'm going to take the results, not your name, and put that into Gen AI for analysis. Cindy asks, are your classes in person, hybrid, or online? Are your students all business students? So this semester, I have 2 courses that I'm teaching, the same course, Introduction to Operations and Supply Chain. I have an in-person section and I have an online section. And then I also teach a project management course that I have one in-person section and one online section. My in-person sections are all designed as HyFlex, meaning that every lecture students can choose whether or not they come in person or they want to watch on Zoom. I record all of those lectures and make those recordings available for students on Canvas, usually within an hour or two after class, which reminds me I haven't done it for my two classes this morning because I was prepping for this. So I need to do that once we're done here. Um, and I'm certainly, I could do a whole other section, a whole other class on kind of that HyFlex and where I think some of the value is in that. Are all my students business students? My 421 classes generally are. It was a K-State 8 designated class, so occasionally I'd get some students from outside of that. My project management course, although designed primarily for business students, I am seeing an increased number of students from like APD, from construction science, that where project management is relevant to them, that they're taking that as an elective. I don't think it necessarily counts, but they're seeing value in it. And I think part of that probably tied to, I've got some pretty good reviews online in terms of instructor. And like some students are saying, I want to take a class I think is interesting from this particular instructor, even though they're not in my college. Other questions that I can answer. Thoughts, feedback. Is this something you see value in? Where do you see like there might be concerns with how I'm doing it or how this would be implemented?
Hi, Brandon. This is me again. Thank you so much for the information. My first question is, when is the best time to launch this survey for this semester?
Because the final exam is one of those components that I want feedback on, I tell students I have it in my very last week's module, and as they're going in to click on this assignment, I kind of say on there, and even on the first paragraph of the survey, like I'd prefer please don't complete this until you're done with the final exam. So I like doing this once everything's done.
Okay. Uh, and that's because you want feedback on related to final exam, right? I'm
Yep.
thinking maybe this can be used also like a midterm, midpoint check-in. So we have time to improve for this semester, not just for the following class, but it's actually it will be helpful for you, the students taking the survey. Um,
I agree. I actually do have a whole other separate survey I do kind of mid semester. I fully endorse kind of whether you're doing them after major exams. I think that was something I learned from TLC as well. Kind of the exam wrapper survey, I think is how it was framed at the time. Definitely saw a lot of value in that. I moved away from having four big high stakes exams during my classes, again, as feedback from TLC, and have more kind of weekly things. So I kind of have just a mid-course, usually right around spring break, that I ask them to fill out a survey. In that survey, one of the things I do is I break down like what is your current grade in this class? How much effort are you putting into this class? I ask them like how many hours on average are you spending in this class? And then I even have them fill out this thing where they have to kind of add it up to 100%. As you look at the time you're spending outside of class, how are you using that time? Are you, reviewing your notes? Are you going back and rewatching the lectures? A whole bunch of different things. And then what I do with that is that, when we come back from break, is I'll say, hey, I'm going to filter the results by those who are getting A's right now. And now I'm speaking to those of you who don't have A's right now. And I just want you to know those getting A's, this is how much average on time they're spending in this class. And this is how they're spending their time in class. And so if you're not matching up with those and you want to get an A, that may be kind of giving some direction as to how other students are finding success in this class. But bottom line, like asking your students for feedback as consistently and regularly as possible is super valuable. I actually have a survey that students fill out every lecture. At the end of class, they do an exit ticket, just three questions. It's like, what did we cover today? What was it? What was a summary of what you covered today? Second is, how well do you feel like the class went on a 4-point scale? How well did you understand the material? I think is the question. And then third question is, what do you wish we spent more time on today? And I use that to then calibrate for the next class. Before we go to the next class, if I saw a whole bunch of similar themes of like, hey, I really wish we spent more time on this section, we can go back and look at that. And it gives me that 1 through 4 um, metric, lets me basically score how well that content landed with students. And I know that when it's underneath a certain amount, like I got to rethink how I do that particular lecture and redo that lecture. So those type of things allow you to, one, calibrate real time and through the semester, and secondly, and this is probably more important than all of this, it shows your students that you care, that you're asking. Like when they realize that you really are going to take their feedback and tweak how you teach, to them it's like, oh my gosh, like you care that I actually learn. So absolutely do that frequently and often. I'll read the comment from Don and then go to Andy. Um, I love the constant feedback you're getting using them for students. Great collaborative class. Yeah, that's one of the key things as to why I think it's important to ask their feedback. Andy.
Yeah, thanks so much for giving this talk. I think that this is great work that you're doing, and I really like the that you're including with it like the purpose. And this is something that I wanted to highlight with like doing these kind of like iterative processes of like getting student feedback. We're not only getting feedback from students that we can use, but also teaching students how to self-evaluate, how to think through like, what am I doing in the class? What am I learning? Like, that's all really important in that learning process. And so one of the things that I had found in my, just to give, my personal experience doing similar types of things, I always have a end of unit self-evaluation, which I find works really well for giving me feedback of like, what things are my students struggling with? What are they feeling confident in? What's going well? And I would give these just like, hey, fill this out. And then I realized that a lot of students were like, like this isn't that important, or like they didn't see why I was doing it. And so I just started adding like, this is what research shows about metacognitive practice. This is why I'm having you, and like, this is what in the quote unquote real world, the professional world, like you should constantly be self-assessing what you're doing, because your boss isn't going, hopefully won't be micromanaging you to the point that they're giving you feedback on every single task. It's up to you to be able to monitor like, how well am I doing? And so I just included this little, paragraph indicating why I did it and what research shows about it. And it completely changed the way that my students approached them. They started really engaging and providing more full answers. I got a lot higher response rates, where previously I would have a bunch of students that just didn't do them. They're like, they're only worth like, 1% of my grade, so it's not that big of a deal. And to see like, oh, actually, yes, this is worthwhile. So I think that having that purpose is really important, and I've seen that in my own classes.
Agreed. Don.
So I'll kind of springboard off some of the stuff that Andy said. So one of the things that I learned in AQ a long time ago, and we were talking about this at the beginning, AQ is it's the Academy of College and University Educators, and they have these wonderful teacher training programs. And Brandon and I both completed a year-long teacher training program as part of this pre-COVID. And one of the things that they did, and it was when you take it, you have to try things in your class, and once in a while you're like, that's kind of dumb, but I got to do it to get the module completed or whatever. And I think sometimes our students feel the same way. And it was like, ask your students how much they engaged today. So not like how engaged were they, but ask them how much they engaged. And I was like, all right, well, I got to do this thing. So I made this survey and I gave it out of my class. And it was really surprising. I noticed two things. Number one, I noticed that they didn't necessarily reflect what I thought they would have reflected. So maybe Andy engaged a whole lot, but she didn't think she engaged a whole lot. And Jeff didn't engage a whole lot, but he's like, I'm all good. So it didn't match what I thought. But one of the things I found is that engagement the next class was much higher, because now they're saying like, did I listen? Did I answer questions that I knew the answers to? Did these things? It like cued them, oh, I'm supposed to do these things. And just kind of going through that process was really, really helpful. The other thing I wanted to kind of point out, and I did this really simply in my class last week, is they do weekly reflections. And I asked, like, what is one of your goals for next week? Or for the rest of the semester, I'm sorry. So what's one of your goals for next semester, or for the rest of the semester? And many of them put, and I could have been about anything, finish the semester strong, graduate, whatever. But maybe because I thought it was part of a class assignment, the vast majority gave a goal regarding my course. And it was things like, I'm going to attend more. I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to answer the questions. And Monday's class was spectacular. So it was right after they many of them had indicated, my goal in this class is to do these activities or these behaviors that show I'm invested and I'm finishing strong. And then they immediately did that. So I think sometimes the feedback is good for us, but it's also good for them. And I really do appreciate the points that both Brandon and Annie have made on those two different domains.
I'll add one more thing to that, in that, Brandon was talking about that you can respond to students and, like, you see their responses, and then you can, either respond to them individually or as a class, like, oh, okay, I see that, like, the students who are getting A's, this is how much time they're spending, this is what they're doing. I also find that this is great for addressing misconceptions, because I've often in these types of surveys or self-evaluations seen students that it seems like they're kind of missing the mark on what the purpose of an assignment is, or what we're doing. And so it gives me an opportunity to be like, hey, I noticed that some of you seem to be thinking that, like, this is why we're doing this. I want to take some time to clarify and make sure that we're all on the same page. And so helping to address misconceptions in the middle of the class rather than finding out at the end of the semester, like, oh, I wish I had known that, I feel like is also a really beneficial thing.
Makes sense. Another hand in queue. How do you pronounce your first name?
I just go by B. Bijan,
B.
but don't worry, just B. Yeah, the
Bijan.
letter B. So this is very helpful. I just have another question. I am about to launch my TVAL, this is the first time ever at K-State. This is my first semester teaching at K-State. So anyway, I think it's time to launch it. I just wonder, how do these surveys go along with the TVAL that happens once per semester?
Yeah. So I usually, as we're kind of approaching the last week, getting into dead week, I start framing them like, hey, there are 4 pieces of feedback that I want to get from you, and that I'm going to encourage you to get. And it sounds like Dawn has a video from last semester to encourage us as well. What I tell them is like, here's 4 things where you're going to be able to give feedback to me. One is the traditional TVAL. Like, it's anonymous. I can't see whether you do it till it's done. I really hope, my goal is I want every single one of you to fill that out, even if you're saying terrible things about me. And I tell them that's the thing that my department head sees. That's the thing that the dean sees about my evaluation. And so please, please, please complete it. Then I go through this one and say, here's my course design survey. I'm going to give you points for this one because I want to know how I can improve the course. Then I have a course delivery survey. That's the anonymous one. I tell them kind of what that purpose is. I go into some questions about the HyFlex environment, whether they find that valuable. And then a fourth one, and I know this may be controversial. I say, if you think that I was an above average instructor, you think that I did well, I would invite you to go fill out Rate My Professor online. And I say, if you think I'm a terrible, you can go do that too. But, I care about that. I care about giving you a good experience. And if you think I've done that well, go share that. And that was something I learned from customer experience, is that if you want your customers to go say good things about you online, you had to ask them. And if you create a mechanism where you're able to address those concerns beforehand, like I said, the anonymous one, like if you've got some issues or you want me to fix something, you feel like I haven't been fair to you, let me know now. I want a chance to try to fix that. And I can capture those negative things beforehand and usually resolve it with the student. That usually means that what's going to end up going out on Rate My Professor is positive reviews. If you go look at my Rate My Professor, I have arguably one of the best profiles online. And I know that's not the end all be all of everything, but it's I think just another artifact that I care about providing a good experience for students.
Great, great. I'm just curious. So do you get a very high rate of completion for all these surveys?
The one that they get points is definitely the highest. Because I have that side by side with the anonymous one, usually you can see that they're doing them right next to each other. So those are my 2 highest. Rate My Professor, I may only get 5 reviews a semester. And then my TVALs still is under 50%, usually it's between 40 and 50%. I wish it would be higher.
I really appreciate all the information.
And with that, we are out of time. So Brandon, thank you so much for a really kind of fruitful discussion about a lot of cool things. I like the practicality, the things we can do tomorrow to make our classes better. And we got some time to do this before the end of this semester, as Brandon said. So Brandon, thank you so much. I'll remind you all, we have TLC Professional Development Certificates. We have a wonderful event tomorrow, showing you the Sunderland Innovation Lab. We drop that information into the chat. Next week in this series, we have Dr. Seuss Parath from the College of Ed talking about mindful metacognition, which can be very, very cool. So we're looking forward to finishing this semester strong, and I thank you for all of your time today. So ideally, we'll see you next week, but either way, have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you.